time to strap in and get ready.
The leaders in NRL SuperCoach are incoming. Bringing you the ultimate insight to help you win your leagues and climb up the rankings.
You're now listening to the Insight NRL Show with your hosts, Brain, Matrix, and Whisperer.
G'day guys, welcome back to another episode of the Insight NRL Show. I am your host, the SuperCoach Brain, and I'm riding solo for the first time this year for a live podcast. It's nice to hop on by myself, but I'm going to be definitely missing my two friends. But it is the end of the season, and it is very, very important that we get things right this week and that we get our trades right. And there's one big question on everybody's mind, and that question is, who do I replace Nathan Cleary with? So we're going to do our best to try and find a replacement for Nathan Cleary, and we're going to dive in and cover all of your questions as well as they are live. So make sure you drop those questions in, guys. Thanks for hopping on. And of course, if you are new to to watching the show or new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button, leave us a like. And for those of you listening on your audio podcast platforms, please hit that follow button and leave us a review. Now, last week was a pretty handy week for myself, so we should talk about that. Now, a little bit of a rewind. I scored 1520, which I went back and had a look through the history of SuperCoach over the last few years, and it's actually my second highest score ever. So not a bad pod and timing to ride solo, so I can gloat and no one can pull me up. So shout out to Matrix. I know that the boys over at the NBL show, Matrix and Hammer, are doing their live at the moment as well. They're just about to start if they haven't already. So go and check them out after you watch me. Don't leave me. But go and check out their NBL SuperCoach show. They're doing some great stuff over there. And the off-season, or the pre-season, I should say, is actually just about to ramp up. So it's going to be a good one. And thanks for hopping on, guys. Fresh Prince, Stream Team reporting in. I don't know about that. I'm not a huge fan of the Stream Team name, but I'll let it pass this time around. And IJ, thanks for hopping in the chat, mate. Yeah, no, it's nothing to do with priorities, mate. They've just, it's that time of the year where NBL is going to start getting going, and Matrix has a big job over there with the NBL show, and Josh is still away for work. So it's all right. I'll hold the fort. We're good. We'll get things covered as we always do. Like I said, 15-20 last week, pretty handy week in the end. I ended up pretty mediocre scores, really, from like my hooker, front row, second row. The best scorer in the second row, luckily, I played Eli Katoa. A lot of people sat him. David Fafita and Britton Nickera were good as well with 77 and 74, so can't complain about that. But front row was mediocre. Tarpany, 49, Barnett, 45, Harry Grant, 57, Ola Kawatu, 47, not ideal. But it was my centre wing and my fullback that carried me this last week. Karaz, 121, Dom Young, 128. Also had Val Holmes, 145, and then I had Turbo at 105, and then Teddy with 125. So it's just the way that it is, but pretty happy with the week. And thanks for hopping on, FC Sports. Good on you. And IJ, yeah, it's that time of the year, mate. At the end of the day, it happens every year. So usually the people that are out of the running, and, obviously if you get knocked out last week in your prelim finals or whatever, and you're not in any cash comps or not in a good spot overall, usually you stop watching podcasts, which is fair enough. So, for anybody that's sticking around, you're obviously serious about it, want to win your cash comps, will hopefully help you do that, or at least get into that top 1K or even a little bit higher, hopefully top 100. That would be great. Let us know what you got in there too in the comments, guys. Let us know what you scored this week. We'll throw them up on the screen there. Fresh Prince with a 1349. Still a pretty strong score. I think 1349, 1350 seemed around that par mark, I think, this week. I think I saw some people get small red arrows with that kind of low 1300s, like 1310, 1320. So thanks, Grimesy, for hopping on, mate. Appreciate the love. Now, what's the sliding door moment for me? I had the decision to, whether I was going to VC Turbo or VC Teddy, and I know it only really got me an extra 40 points in the end, but going with Teddy over Turbo was a really tough decision from last week that I feel like made a big difference. My sit v starts weren't ideal either, though, but I didn't play Casey McLean, so I missed out on some points there as well. So probably should have played him in the end, but that's SuperCoach, isn't it? Now, guys, we'll get into the injuries for this week. There are a couple of very relevant ones. Now, the HIAs this week, we've got Cody Walker. He copped a head knock against the Tigers and failed to finish the game, so he will miss this week. Connor Watson also missing this week. That's going to burn. That's going to really hurt some people. Commiserations for those of you that have Connor Watson. Hopefully you have some trades up your sleeve. And I think that's going to be the theme of the podcast tonight is if you have some trades, these are the moves I'd make. I have 2 trades left, and I am very nervous about it. Definitely going to use one of them, trying to find a Nathan Cleary replacement. And then the other one, I'm probably going to hold it at this point. I just know that next week is going to be carnage with all of the risk around restings and things like that. And even round 27 could be even tougher. So definitely want to hold some trades if you can. But for those of you with like 4 or 5 trades left, you'll be able to make a couple this week and hopefully put yourself into a really good position to win your matchups in the semi-finals, get through to your head-to-head grand finals, and hopefully put yourself in an even better spot to climb up the rankings in that final round as well, which will also, as we know, be pretty tough. Sione Katoa was the only other one with a HIA that will miss this week as well. So he's replaced by Samuel Stone Street on the right wing for the Sharkies. So those are the only HIAs which are good. Nathan Cleary, that's the big talking point, isn't it? That's why we're here. We're trying to find a Nathan Cleary replacement this week. Shoulder subluxation, 4 weeks. So the Penrith Panthers are pretty confident that he will be back for finals, which is great. But in saying that, doesn't do anything for me or my SuperCoach team or anybody else out there because he was 99.7% owned, I think, in top teams. So congratulations to those of you that faded, but I can guarantee they're probably a little bit behind off the back of that too. So yes, tough for Nathan Cleary, but he will be out. But in saying that, Jerome Luai moves into the 7 for the Panthers. So he could be maybe one of those options that we use to replace Cleary with. Who knows? We'll have a chat about those best replacements a little bit later. Tyson Gamble also broken hand. I don't think it's a severe break, but they've definitely said he won't be playing this week and he hasn't been named. So tough for the Knights. We'll see Jack Cogger come into the team there for the Knights to replace Tyson Gamble this week. Fanua Bole, this one hurts me. He went down with a knee. Now, apparently he was okay to come back on. And whether he was or he wasn't, I don't know. But they strapped him up and they had him on the sideline ready to go. I was at the game and they just didn't end up using him in the end, but maybe rotation didn't play out or maybe they didn't want to, but it wasn't worth the risk. And look, when you're at the end of the season, you've got nothing to play for. It doesn't make sense to go and throw Fanua Bole back on the field. So yeah, knee for him, but he has been named, I think, as far as I'm aware this week, which is good. He's been named off the bench for the Tigers. So very close watch there, but not SuperCoach relevant. The next guy is, though, Josh Curran. Now, he obviously finished the game, but he looked in quite severe pain. He has been named for the Bulldogs, so no need to stress. But in saying that, it does start to create a few question marks now around Josh Curran and what we're going to do with him if you do have him or held him. Unfortunately, he's probably going to be carrying that AC joint injury, and it looks like it's one of those pain tolerance issues. So hopefully you can get through these games, but I'm just not 100% confident that he's not going to continue to re-aggravate that injury moving forward. So just it's not ideal. Is it worth a trade out at front row forward? Look, depending on your cover, if you've got like a Samuel Afainu and another insert one of the top 3 or 4 front row forwards, I'd be okay just holding Curran on the bench and maybe just picking who I play him against or if I need him. I just hate to waste another trade at front row forward, so I don't know whether that's worth doing. But he has been named this week, so good news. And Max King will talk about the Dogs in the lineup soon. Max King's been named as well, or he's been named on the extended bench, I should say. So we might see him maybe sooner rather than later. Could be even as early as next week if they're starting to work through whether he's going to be coming back or not. Jaden Beryl with an elbow hyperextension. That's the second time he's done that this year, so unlucky for him for the Sharks. Now, Tommy Talau hasn't been named this week. He had that pec issue last week that he went off with, and the report is that it's not as serious as initially thought, which is great, but he definitely will be missing this week in a short period of time. So we'll be looking out to see him hopefully back next week or the week after. Ethan Strange also hasn't been named with a calf issue for the Raiders. So we'll see a bit of a shuffle there that we'll talk about soon in the centres and at fullback with Joey Rapana coming back. And the last, I guess, injury relevance to talk about is Reece Walsh and Payne Haas. Now, Kevin Walters and Walsh and Haas are both optimistic that they'll both be back before the end of the regular season. I mean, Walsh, I can understand Walsh. There's every chance Walsh could be named next week as per NRL Physio. Payne Haas could be around 27, 26, but I mean, look, just depends how this week goes, really, doesn't it? Like if the Broncos are still within striking distance of that top 8, they'll definitely be bringing Haas back as soon as they can. But, if they lose this week, they're pretty much out of the running. They do have a decent matchup, but again, they haven't been playing their best footy either. I'd say if they lose this week, they'll be wrapping Haas up in some cotton wool and not really worrying about the rest of this season. But there is some optimism that both of those guys will be back before the season starts, which is great. Now, guys, be patient with me in the live chat because we are obviously being by myself here. I'm going to try and keep an eye on the comments as they come through, but usually I get a bit of downtime to have a drink or, star some questions while Maddie's talking or Josh is talking. So bear with me. I might just go with a couple of different little sections where I'll go through and read the comments as they come through. Raymond Crane, I've got you in one of the leagues coming up this week in the semi-finals. Hopefully you don't go large again. I've got you in one of the head-to-heads. Look, I hope I do. But yeah, it's one of those weeks, isn't it, where there's a couple of very big options and captains are going to be crucial this week. We've got a really tough decision on which captaincy to take, and there are a few good options this week. So that could determine the week, really. But yeah, some very favourable matchups we'll need to keep an eye on. IJ, I see your questions in here, mate. I will get through to them. And yes, we are having a beer at the footy on round 27. So for anybody keen that wants to come to Campbelltown Stadium, I know it's a bit of a trek for some of you, but if you're around or close or want to watch the Tigers and the Eels game, we'll do a bit of an Insight Fantasy Sports NRL meetup for anyone who's keen to have a beer and chat footy and just watch the Tigers come 16th. So if anybody wants to come and do that, I know IJ's been keen for a while now. We'll make that happen. Grant Anderson, I missed that one for HIA. He's out as well this week. Good pick up, Fresh Prince. Thanks for that. And unfortunately, you've got him, which sucks. That's very unlucky. Guys, all right, let's move into the weekly preview and have a look at the week ahead. And as always, guys, the weekly preview is brought to you by our friend Ryan from Astute Newstead. For those of you that are either looking to get into the home loan market, maybe you're already in the market, but you want to save some cash, you want to maybe renovate, or you just want to free up some money and spend it on other things. And you can hit up Ryan from Astute Newstead for an obligation and a cost-free inquiry. So it won't cost you anything. You don't have to stress about paying anything up front with brokers. They'll look after you, especially Ryan. I've gone through Ryan twice with my own house, and he's looked after me every single step of the way and done all the hard work and the heavy lifting for me, which is, I think, the big daunting part with going with a broker. Or just going, you don't have to go and negotiate with the big banks. The broker does it for you. They've got access to over 50 lenders as well at Astute Newstead. So Ryan's link tree, it's in the description below. If that scenario fits the bill for you and this is where you're at in your time of life, then hit Ryan up and he'll look after you. Now, North Queensland Cowboys on the bye. Now, they're not very popular in terms of SuperCoach assets, are they? This year. I mean, maybe some of you have Reece Robson. I know there was a little bit of a hammy concern for Reece Robson if you have him, but he'll have a bit of a rest this week, so that's good. He probably needs it. Valentine Holmes is probably the big one that will be missing this week for the Cowboys. Maybe you're a Ruben Cotter holder still, but I would say that there's not – maybe Scotty Drinkwater if you still have him, but I assume you've got one of the big three in Ponga, Turbo or Teddy. So, that's basically where we're at for the Cowboys. They're out this week, so it shouldn't hurt us too much SuperCoach-wise. And the good thing is we haven't seen any restings yet. There was a risk that Bellamy came out and said that he might be sporadically resting his players in clumps over the last 3 weeks of the season. So the good thing so far, so good. We've seen all of these guys' names, but keep an eye out on that Storm team list 1 hour before. We'll continue to bring you the updates on Instagram and social media and in the Discord to make sure you're on top of all of that. Now, like I said, it is head-to-head semi-finals, so obviously there's a lot to play for this week. And there are pretty popular buys. We'll talk about them later, but let's move through the games first of all, and we'll talk about the ins and outs. In game 1 on Thursday night, we've got the Tigers and the Manly Sea Eagles. They're at Leichhardt Oval. Look, this is going to be an interesting one. I'm not 100%. I'm not sure. I'm 98% sure that Manly are going to do a number on the Tigers, but you just don't know. Leichhardt's a funny place. So we seem to play a little bit better at Leichhardt. We've won 50% of our games at Leichhardt and Campbelltown in the last 5 or 6 games. So that's, a handy little record for a team that's won 3 spoons in a row. Now, Luke Lalii, he is out. Adam Dewey is also out. So precautionary, apparently. It's like load management from what I've heard. But so Dewey's and Lalii have been replaced by Alamalo and Tupou is back. I think his first game since round 8. So good to see him back. Tommy Talau, like we mentioned, out injured with that pec, and he's been replaced by Tolu Kola. So handy little replacement there for Manly. The conversation becomes, is the DCE, Turbo, Garrick, Hamoli stack too many players? Because I am genuinely asking for myself. Because if I buy DCE, I'll have those 4. I'll have like 3 of the right edge attack there. And then obviously I'll have Turbo who swings both sides. So I'm unsure about that. But again, it's kind of like the Walker, Crichton, Teddy, Manu, Dom Young stack at the Roosters that you could potentially have. So that there's some question marks to how many players from each team are we going to be looking at, or is the maximum amount? And honestly, the DCE, Turbo, Garrick, and Hamoli stack is actually very, very appealing right now, especially coming up against the Tigers this week. But there is a reason why I'm a little bit cautious on DCE, and I'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the comparison and who we should bring in at halfback. Game 2 for the Warriors and the Bulldogs at Go Media Stadium in Auckland. This is SJ's final game. So if there is one game that you're going to watch intently this week, please make it this one. I think he deserves a nice little finish there. And, the Bulldogs having to travel over the ditch, it's fitting. The Bulldogs have been fantastic all year, but I'd love to see SJ and the Warriors just get one up on them just to finish off so that SJ can finish in New Zealand on a high. So SJ comes in for Chanel Harris-Tavita. Wade Egan returns as well, and Lussick drops to the bench. The Dogs have been named 1 to 17, which is great. Josh Curran, he's been named, and Max King, like I mentioned earlier, is on the extended bench. I think playing anybody against the Bulldogs seems to be a no-no at the moment. And to answer your question here, IJ, DWZ to play against the Dogs? No, not at all. And look, I'll explain it. I'll bring it up on the screen now so everybody can see it. But what we see here is, thanks to NRLSCstats.com, they every single week populate all of the statistics, scrape the data from the SuperCoach website, and basically come up with a ranking system on teams and positions that play against certain teams. And as you can see there, we're talking about the New Zealand Warriors and the Bulldogs here. You can see at the top of the screen on the left-hand side. Now, the Bulldogs end up being, I think, the 3rd worst team for hookers, definitely the hardest matchups for front row forwards, second hardest matchup for 2RFs, the equal 3rd hardest matchup for halfbacks, and then the equal 2nd hardest matchup for 5'8". Now, the only people that seem to be scoring enough points against the Bulldogs to be relevant are centre wings. So does that make DWZ relevant? I still don't love it. I mean, SJ back probably does help that a little bit. So I'm not 100% off it. I'm just there is risk there, as you can see there. The Bulldogs, they're the best defensive team in the competition. It's as simple as that. So it's very hard to go against them there. A lot of concerns if you do have a lot of Warriors. I'll be playing Barnett, and of course you play AFB. That's completely fine. Not a question at all whether you play those two guys, because they're pretty matchup proof for the most part at front row. But any of the outside backs, I'd be questioning whether I'd be playing them this week. DWZ needs to absolutely score a try as a bare minimum, and the base isn't really there, so he could easily copy you a 30. The Bulldogs have been putting clamps on these centre wings for a while now this year, and they are one of the hardest matchups this year in terms of SuperCoach points. So, tread carefully there. Game 3, guys, Broncos and the Eels at Suncorp. I'm unsure which way I want to go with this one because, the Eels have been poor and they've been very leaky on their edges, but the Broncos have also been equally as poor in the last month or so. Walsh has been replaced by Tristan Saylor on this one. Karapani, he's been benched for Selwyn Cobbo, who, mind you, I'm not going to do a pod segment tonight. But what I will say is that I actually really like Selwyn Cobbo as a bit of a pod play. He will be on the right wing, as far as I'm aware. Jesse Arthur should be on the left, I'm assuming. So Cobbo could honestly put a couple on the Eels who concede, I think it's the 2nd most tries to right wingers or the 3rd most. They're definitely in the top 3. Most conceded points to right wingers this year in the competition. And if Cobbo's on that side running against Mike Acevo, who's got the defensive talent of probably me, if I stepped on the field, then I think Cobbo's in for a big score this week now that he's back. The good news for those of you that are on Willison as well, Willison, he goes back to start this week, which is great. So I'm sure Matrix will be very happy. He bought him a couple of weeks ago and it's paid out quite well at the moment. For the Eels, Sivo and Tuolangi replaces Tungo, which is great for those of you that are stuck with an AE nightmare and Jake Tungo, who scored and ruined a lot of loops this week. So hopefully he stays out. That would be great for me. That means that there's one less AE risk there for those of you that are going to VC Turbo on Thursday night. Sean Lane, he moves to prop as well, which is great. And Wirra McGregor, he's out suspended, so Lane will move to prop to cover him. Now, the question I posed earlier was, are the Broncos, do they have enough to play for? Now, obviously, if the Broncos lose to the Eels here, I can kiss my 16th position West Tigers goodbye, essentially. But I would like to think the Broncos should beat the Eels at home. Yes, they're missing Reece Walsh. Yes, they're missing Payne Haas. They've got a few troops out. But getting Cobbo's back is big, and Adam Reynolds obviously is playing in this one. That's huge. Ezra Mam's still out, which hurts, but still got Paddy Carrigan in the middle too. So I think the Broncos can do enough against the Eels, who just haven't really shown me any reason as to why they should be competitive against the Broncos, even how poorly they've been. So if we pull up the ladder very quickly, I'm pretty sure that the Broncos are sitting in good internet. They're sitting in 10th, right? So they're 2 wins away from the Dragons, who are in 8th place. Now, basically, the Dragons, essentially, they have to lose nearly every game. For and against isn't really playing. Yeah, so the for and against actually hurts the Dragons more than it hurts the Broncos, weirdly. -4 for the Broncos and -92 for the Dragons. So essentially, the Dragons need to lose 2 games and the Broncos need to win 2. And the Broncos should take their spot in 8th, pending how the Dolphins go, who are in 9th on 26 points, 1 win outside the 8. So, yeah, very interesting little watch there for the Raiders, Knights, Broncos, and Dolphins and Dragons. They're probably all competing. Those 5 teams are competing for the 8, unless the Cowboys absolutely shit the bed. I mean, they've got a guaranteed couple of points this week. So, yeah, very interesting, very close watch for what's going to be happening there for those 5 teams. There's still plenty to play for, especially for the Pongers and the Marjus and guys like that as well. So, guys, we'll move on to game 4 very quickly. Raiders versus the Panthers at GIO. Rapana, he comes back from his HIA that he missed last week. He's back at fullback. KO Weeks moves to 5'8". Adam Cook moves out to 18th man. Strange drops out with that calf injury, and Seb Chris moves to centre for him. Now, for the Panthers, we've got Jerome Luai. He moves into the 7 at halfback for Cleary. Brad Schneider, he's at 5'8". This is a conversation in itself that I'll talk about in a second. Summerton comes in to replace Mitch Kenny. And Martin is back on the edge. Lindsay Smith drops to the bench. Sorensen's still out with that hammy. So there's a bit going on there for the Panthers. Now, the question becomes, does Luai pose as a replacement for Cleary? And I want to dive into a little bit of depth with this now, because I kind of want to nip this in the bud and make it easier for us to have the conversation about who to replace Cleary with later. I personally don't love Luai as a replacement this week. I know I put on X earlier and I got a little bit overexcited at the start that if Luai was named in the 7, he actually has a 98 average in the 7 jersey when he is playing at halfback. But that 98 average came with Jack Cole in the team. Unfortunately, with Schneider, and I'll shout out, I think it's Broomer on Twitter. Put some really good stats out today, and I'll quickly find them. Here we go. Luai's scores this year with Schneider, partnering him in the halves. 61 and 130 seem great. Then he goes 55, 41, 33, and 33. Now, 4 of those were against teams that aren't even top 8 teams either. So there's a little bit to take at that, and he has been named at 7, but there's still too many question marks. I feel like Brad Schneider's a little bit of a Braden Trindle in terms of usage needs. We talk about Trindle and how he affected Nico. Brad Schneider wants his hands on the ball as much as Braden Trindle does, or maybe that's an exaggeration a tiny bit, but he definitely wants his hands on the ball. So what I would definitely be doing is avoiding Luai. I purely think that the options are going to be Daly Cherry Evans, Sam Walker, Jerome Hughes, and potentially even Ben Hunt. I think they're probably the 4 guys that I'd be looking at. I think I'm putting a line through Jerome Luai this week. The question mark also was centered around the fact that maybe there was, a chance that Luai rests. I actually don't think he does now, especially with the Panthers. If they lose one more game, then the Roosters, obviously, let's just assume that they're going to win the rest of their games. If the Panthers lose one game and the Roosters win one, the Roosters have a way better for and against, and they'll jump into second place and get a home quarterfinal. Now, playing a game at Allianz versus playing a game at Bluebet Stadium is a very, very different kettle of fish. So I can guarantee that there's plenty to play for here for the Panthers. They're going to want to play at Bluebet. They're not going to want to drop a game, and I can't see them dropping too many or dropping too many players or resting too many players in the lead up for that. So that's probably how I'm feeling about that. Game 5, guys. Storm versus the Dolphins at Amy Park. This could be an absolute flogging, I reckon. There's every chance the Storm put a score up here. in Melbourne as well, the Dolphins have been conceding 30 points on average over the last 7 games. So, there's going to be some points scored. I'd like to see Jerome Hughes on the back of a few of those. I'm sure Cam Munster will also be on the back of a few of those points. Hopefully Eli Katoa as well, because these are the guys that I'm hopefully going to be banking to get into my grand finals on. Now, Anderson, he comes in to replace, he's replaced, I should say, by Wishart, who goes on the wing, and I can't argue with that at all. Wishart could slot in anywhere and do a job, so he's proven that. Suafa'alongo comes onto the bench. Christian Welch, he's on the extended bench coming back from that injury. He hasn't played since round 18, so it'll be good to see him. And the only other change there for the Dolphins is Mark Nichols is replaces Lachlan Hubner after his week out last week. Now, Hughes, again, he's another guy we're going to be talking about as a Cleary replacement. One thing to keep in mind, and we'll talk about this later, one thing to keep in mind is that the Finns concede the most points to 5/8 in 2024. So if you're a Cameron Munster holder, or maybe if you've got some nuts on you and you want to take a punt on Cameron Munster, this week could be big. And obviously there's just too much risk there, obviously, for you to go and get Cam Munster and then he ends up being rested. There's every chance of that happening. But that conceding the most points to 5/8 this year. So take with that information whatever you will. Now, guys, the 6th game, Rabbitohs versus the Knights at Accor Stadium. Cody Walker, he is out, replaced by Dean Hawkins. He's a sell, I think, Cody Walker, if you've got him, unfortunately. If you've got enough trades, obviously. If you have cover, I don't feel great about Cody Walker. And the Rabbitohs draw isn't exactly amazing next week anyway. So I think Cody Walker to one of these great halfback options could be the play. If you're stuck with Cody and with Nathan Cleary and you've got 2 trades left, maybe you just pull the trigger on both and get DCE and Walker. Maybe I'm giving away my 2 favourite options there, but that could be the play. The Knights, they concede the most points to halfbacks and equal most points to 5/8 with the Dolphins. So one thing to keep in mind there is that, unfortunately, with Walker being out, he would have been a really good matchup this week against the Knights, who concede the most points to halves. Good to see Ty Munro and Michael Cheekham also back in the reserves. Ty Munro played a really good game of cup last week. I know the S&C coach for the flag team at the Souths, and apparently Ty Munro was outstanding coming back from that shoulder injury. I think it was collarbone. So definitely would be a good little addition. Hopefully next year he drops a bit of cash for us so we can pick him up early. Jack Cogger, he comes in to replace Gamble with that broken hand. And we've got Will Price coming back in on the bench, and Dylan Lucas, he comes back in for McCarthy. So good to see him finally named again. Now, here's another stack for you, for those of you that like a bit of stack. We were talking about stacks earlier for the Roosters. And for Manly, how about this one for a stack against the Rabbitohs? Ponga, Marju, Gagai, and Sharp. These guys are all going to feast this week. There is every chance that they will be very, very large. Now, we'll bring those matchups back on the screen, and if we look at South's matchup, doesn't seem that great here when we're talking about SuperCoach points, but if you go and have a look at SuperCoach Guns, for those of you that are in the Discord, SuperCoach Guns try map, you'll see that Souths actually concede a shit ton of points, a shit ton of tries, I should say, to wingers and centres. Now, if we bring it up, I won't be able to get it on the screen, but yeah, right wingers absolutely feast. They've conceded the most tries to right wingers in the competition. So Fletcher Sharp and then Ponga sweeping down that right-hand side. Dane Gagai getting him open there, getting in a bit of space. That right edge, I think, will be peppered again by the Knights against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. So yeah, that could be where the points are in this one. Ponga probably go pretty large, I reckon. Game 7, Titans and the Roosters at Seabus. Fermor and Mofo Fodawaker. They return. They're back. Aaron Clark and Cleese Haas, they drop back to the bench, and that means Pahulu and Keenan Palacia drop out of the team. Jared Warrior-Hargreaves, he's back, which maybe impacts Terrell May, maybe it doesn't, but they do lose Connor Watson, so that does hurt them. Spencer Leniu drops back to the bench, and then we've got Nat Butcher, who comes back into the team at lock for Connor Watson, and May does remain on the bench. So for those of you that still have Terrell May, I think it's time maybe to move on. He's bled so much of your cash right now. So yeah, I think he's probably maybe you can get an upgrade. Just depends how many trades you have. If you've got 5 or more trades, then I probably would trade him. I think maybe you're stuck with him now, though, unfortunately. I guess a point to know here is that only the Eels, Warriors, Manly, and the Tigers concede more points to fullbacks than the Titans do. So basically, they concede the fifth most amount of points to fullbacks, and concede the most tries to fullbacks, being 19 tries. So the question now becomes, who do we go with, Teddy or Turbo? That's the very interesting question. And of course, Sam Walker's the other viable Cleary replacement, and he is, I think, the second most purchased this week. I'll save the Turbo versus Teddy chat for captaincy. Game 8, Dragons and Sharks at Wynn Stadium. We've got Raymond Fatala-Mariner. He's back on the bench. That's the only change for St. George. And we've got Trindle back for the Sharks. I don't consider Trindle to be a buy this week, I don't think. Dragons have been playing pretty decent footy for the most part, aside from the game a couple of weeks ago where they got flogged. So Trindle's back, Brayley back to hooker, McInnes back to lock, I think is much better for the Sharkies. I'm sure that those of you that follow the Sharks would agree. We've also got Kale Iro back in the team. So for those of you that have him, you can breathe a sigh of relief this week. And then we've got Teague Wilton and Tom Hazelton also back. So the Sharks are near full strength. Unfortunately, just missing Sione Katoa, who's out for Sam Stone Street this week with that HIA. So those are the changes and what is happening across the grounds this week, guys. Now, of course, we should move into our squeeze of the week that is brought to you by the Standard Squeeze. For those of you that love a little beverage there, the Standard Squeeze have got awesome food-grade quality plastic products for you to go and if you're sick of breaking glass bottles and you know, you go boating or fishing or camping or, you know, you're in a place where you do have to bring a bottle of vodka, a bottle of bourbon or whatever it be, you can chuck it in the Standard Squeeze little plastic bottle. It won't break. You can chuck it in the freezer or the fridge, and you can use the code IFS15 to get yourself 15% off everything in store. They've also got some cool apparel there for the Standard Squeeze. I've got my my tea at the moment in this little 4-in-1, keeps it nice and warm. Pretty much for the whole pod. It'll still be warm by the time I finish talking tonight. So always nice. The Standard Squeeze will look after you if you're a coffee drinker, tea drinker, or you can use it as a tumbler and put your bourbon or your whiskey in it at night as well to keep that nice and cold. So IFS15, go to thestandardsqueeze.com. Now, shout out to Nick. Now, this is a very special squeeze of the week, and I'm glad I get to talk about this one myself. Now, Nick, coach of the West Tigers, for those of you that have watched all year, Nick has been in and around the top spot. He's been battling it out with a couple of other guys there in this Inside Unlimited League. And the winner, of course, does take home a SuperCoach Champions ring. Shout out to SC Rings. And he is now currently leading the Unlimited League. He's up 7 spots into 8th overall. And the most impressive part, being at this position, is he's also taken out the squeeze of the week with the highest score in the Unlimited League. 1635 this week is just monumental, especially being up the top there. A lot of the time we will find, you know, the squeeze of the week and the highest scorer in the league often doesn't have like a top 100 ranking for the most part. That's someone that might be sitting at 5,000th or 10,000th or 20,000th or maybe even a sniper team. We don't give them out, by the way. But there is, it's very rare that I see like a top 10, top 15 player get the squeeze of the week. So congratulations, Nick. Reach out to us, mate. Awesome effort. And, you know, we're cheering you on as the leader of the league as well to hopefully take it out and challenge some of these guys in the top 5 over the next 3 weeks, mate. So reach out to us on Instagram, wherever you follow us, email, and let us know whether you want a 4-in-1 or a combo pack. Send us your address and your name, mate, and we'll get that sent out to you. Congratulations. And also, if you want to let us know in the DMs or whatever it is, how many trades you've got left, I'd love to know. I'm very curious. But congratulations. Now, I'll quickly move through these comments very quick so we don't miss anybody. So IJ, if the Broncos win versus the Eels, Haas probably comes back next week. I mean, look, there's still question marks about next week. He hasn't been named on the extended bench this week. Usually they would probably pop him on the extended if he was a chance next week. But again, they're probably just going to put him through a rigor of fitness tests next week to see how he goes. I would say that if it's a must win, I would say Payne Haas will be putting his hand up trying to knock the door down to get in that team. So I think you probably could. If you still have Payne Haas there and you've got no trades or you held off on trading him, maybe that's the play. Just hold off a little bit and hopefully you've got a pod Payne Haas for the last 2 rounds of the year. How good would that be? Matt Lieberter, what would it take for Brain to play a piano solo? No, mate, unfortunately, this isn't my house. I wish it was, but it's not. It's just a green screen to make my house look nice and pretty. Otherwise, I'd just be sitting in a garage. So apologies for the lead on there. Maybe house catfished everyone. No, I used to play piano when I was younger, actually. But I think I gave that up when I was like 7 or 8. So shout out to Mum for buying a grand piano that I never used. I'll probably have to pay her back for that one day. Yes, Adam, halves partners killing two teams. Schneider, not great for Luai, and Trindle hurts Nico. Yes, unfortunately, we all felt that Trindle and Nico effect a little bit later. IJ, do I think that Luai is the buy next season as a main man for the Tigers? Look, I do really like him in the 7. I like him with the kicking game. I think Galvin probably does a little bit too much maybe to really love Luai as a buy over the Nicos and the Clearys and the top tier options. I don't think Luai is a top tier option even at the Tigers, especially because the Tigers aren't going to just become this miraculous top 4 team out of nowhere. So no, I don't think he's going to be a buy next year, but maybe the year after we get a look and after he finds a bit of cohesion with his teammates, I reckon it could be not a bad little pod play. All right, what else have we got? IJ reckons Wishart out, Farlongo in come game day. Okay. Any Herbie Farnworth lovers from Nathan? If we bring the draw up, let's have a look at the Finns finish to the year. It's not ideal, I don't think, from memory. So maybe that'll squash any of those and any of that love that you have for Herbie Farnworth. But if we look at the Finns at the top there, they've got Melbourne this week, Broncos the week after in a must-win game and a bit of a Queensland derby, into the Knights, who will be also in a must-win game in round 27. So yeah, I can't say I love it. I'd probably be a Farnworth fader, unfortunately. IJ, I'm not 100% sure on the pricing next year. Obviously, he hasn't played any football this year, so there's usually a fair bit of algorithms and a lot of statistics and shit that they look at in terms of how much they're going to drop him. But also, he won't be like a bottom dollar guy. He'll come in at probably that 400-500K mark maybe, which is definitely a buy. If Campbell Graham comes in, hopefully he drops that far. So that would be fantastic. Yes, there are, Captain Harry. There's a lot of very juicy fullback captaincy options this week, and it's very hard to pick one. So I wish I could. I wish I could let you know who I'm going to pick as captain, but I don't even know yet. I'm not 100% sure. Next week's squeeze of the week needs to be like the AFL boys do. Guess what player goes the largest and what their score is in a win? Yeah, I mean, look, we can change it up next year if you want. We do like to recognise the Unlimited League top scorers as well. So we might be able to just maybe split the prize and work out how we can play it that year. But yeah, I like the idea, IJ. The Skitty and Horse do a great job over there on the AFL show. So more than happy to take on some ideas. We've got a couple of questions coming in about last reserves and things like that, which is fantastic. So guys, stick with me and I'll answer those questions at the end. Now, let's talk halfback replacements. Let's talk about who we need to get in for Nathan Cleary and have a look at the trade trends for this week ahead.
Target acquired.
All right. Thanks for sticking with me, guys, so far. Let's talk replacements for Nathan Cleary, the fun part, the reason why everyone's here, and let's get it on the screen. Let's get this thing off the front of my face, though. Done myself a bit of a disservice there. All right. So the 5 options that I see as probably the 5 best options: Daly Cherry Evans, purely because of his matchup against the Tigers. I'll talk about the rest of his matchups later. We've got Sam Walker, who has a really nice run home, but there is a little bit of a risk of a rest. Now, I don't know whether I buy into this Roosters resting narrative that's floating around at the moment. I think a lot of people think potentially the Roosters are going to cop a rest, but I don't know. I mean, they've just come off a bye a week ago, right? They're playing great footy. Do you really want to lose that momentum by taking a week off? They've got some nice little tune-up games on the run home as well. The next 3 games are definitely games that they're expected to win and win comfortably. So do I believe in the whole Roosters rest? I don't know. Maybe like a guy like Gus Crichton, who's had probably the biggest workload, maybe a Teddy. I don't know whether Sam Walker would have a rest, though, if I'm completely honest. So bringing it back to this conversation, I'm confident enough that Sam Walker doesn't get rested on the run home, but don't shoot me if it happens. Jerome Hughes. If you don't already have Jerome Hughes, now he's the most owned player out of these 5. I've already got him. So I think it's hard for me to kind of get my head around why I'd buy him now. If I was in the position where I didn't have Jerome Hughes or any of these guys, I don't think I'd be buying Jerome Hughes either, to be completely honest. If we slide down the bottom there to the draw, you can see that the Storm have the Dolphins this week, which is, don't get me wrong, a fantastic matchup. But having they have to travel all the way up to the Cowboys, to North Queensland, to Townsville, to play the Cowboys in round 26, which is head-to-head finals. Now, the one thing that Craig Bellamy has said is that he will be resting or looking at resting his main guys from the Storm. Your Hugheses, potentially even Munsters. I'm not sure on Eli Katoa, but he has been carrying that injury. He'll be looking at resting those main guys. Ryan Pappenhausen probably a prime candidate for a rest as well. to avoid having to travel them all the way up to Townsville and do a big road trip. Now, obviously, I'm not quite sure what the turnaround is, but having to go from Melbourne to Townsville to Melbourne to Suncorp over that week and a half period, just at the end of the year, it doesn't make 100% sense as to why he would be resting them and then potentially playing them at Suncorp in round 27, just giving them a rest so they don't have to travel up north. That's probably the more realistic way I would see this playing out. So that's probably why I don't like Jerome Hughes that much as a buy. I do have him now, and I definitely won't be trading him at all, and I'm praying that he doesn't get rested next week. But in saying that, I think he will. And unfortunately, that means I definitely would not be buying if I didn't have him. Now, Jerome Hughes, I already spoke about. We're going to park that conversation. I'm just not a huge fan of Jerome Hughes next to Brad Schneider. The average looks pretty subpar in comparison to his average with Jack Cole. So I think we can rule out Jerome Luai. We can rule out Jerome Hughes. Get the Jeromes out of here. We can move them on. Now, Ben Hunt. Very interesting one, Ben Hunt. I mean, he's 564K, so he is definitely the cheapest option. He's got a 63-point average, so definitely competes with the main guys here on this screen. When you look at the average, the season average, Luai's a 61, Jerome Hughes is a 74, and then Walker 68, DCE 68. I'll come back to both of those later. Ben Hunt, when we look at the final draw, they've got the Sharks this week, not an easy matchup. But into Parramatta, who is a very favourable matchup, and into the Canberra Raiders, which is an even nicer matchup. Now, the reason I say this is because if we bring this back up on the screen very quickly based on points conceded to positions, you will see that the Canberra Raiders, where are they on this screen? Now, they're 7th to halfbacks, which is pretty handy matchup, right? So for me, I don't actually mind that matchup for Ben Hunt at all, the Canberra Raiders in 27, and I don't mind the Eels matchup in 26 either. Now, for me, the Dragons are sitting in 8th as well, so there is plenty to play for. Do they have a game at home? I'm just quickly trying to... Yeah, they've got one game this week against the Sharks at home. Pretty tough matchup. Now, Ben Hunt is probably my third favourite out of these 5 guys. So that basically leaves us with DCE and Sam Walker. Now, here's my thinking. For me, I currently have Nathan Cleary, Jerome Hughes. I've got Matt Burton at 5'8" with Galvin, Lockie Galvin. So I don't really need to touch my 5'8". I just need to find a replacement. I don't care if it's a halfback only. I don't care if it's a 5'8". Doesn't bother me. I can swap things around. The thing that's in my head at the moment is DCE this week could be anything. This week could be monstrous. It could be 120, 140, 150 plus. We know that DCE's got the big ceiling in him. When we look at DCE's scores from this year, he does have that 128. But aside from that, his second highest score is 105. So he's and 103. So he's had 300s this year, which, yeah, it's kind of expected from DCE. But he is rock solid. He does not have a very low floor. When you look at the last few games, he's played his, 73, 77, 75, 50, 82, 105. There is that 26 there, but it is against the Panthers. We can forgive that. The only other concerning score there against an easy matchup would be the Dolphins, where he scored 36 in round 10. But other than that, DCE rock solid, could be large this week. And for those of you that really, really want to make sure that you can lock in your semi-final and win your semi-final this week, I do think that Daly Cherry Evans has the best matchup this week. Now, in saying that, though, we've got the Bulldogs and the Sharks in round 26 and round 27, who are incredibly tough teams to match up against defensively. So, if let's bring this up on the screen here. So if we go to 2024, for those of you that want to know how to do this, this is exactly how you get in there. So you can see there on the screen, you can see with the Bulldogs against halfbacks, they're the best defensive team against halfbacks in the competition. So next week, DCE coming up against the hardest matchup he could possibly have. So let's say DCE scores you 50 next week. Then who does he have in the last round? If we bring the draw up very quickly, Manly have the Sharks. And the Sharks now, if we find them on the screen, are the 9th hardest matchup. So a middle of the ground, not easy, not tough. Parramatta are a tougher and Roosters are a tougher matchup, but then basically they're the 4th hardest matchup next week. So he's coming up against the hardest matchup and the 4th hardest matchup to finish the year. Now, these teams also concede the least, I think, the second least and third least most SuperCoach points per player. So for me, I'm a little bit concerned about the DCE play. Yes, it might be a really good short-term play against the Tigers, but then he's coming up against two incredibly solid defensive teams this year. So if it's really important you win, maybe DCE is the option. But again, Sam Walker is also a fantastic option. I actually really like Sam Walker as a play this week. So, if we chuck DCE, this isn't going to work, is it? Anyway, don't mind me. If we look at DCE versus Walker, at the end of the day, I'm picking Walker. I think it's as simple as that. I am not overly worried about the rest. And, maybe I'm going to eat my words. Maybe this is really going to hurt me, and maybe I'm going to end up in round 26 with Roosters players out, Storm players out, Tigers on the bye, and I've got fucking 7 players available. And that could honestly happen next week. And then I can kiss any need to win a cash comp goodbye. But look, at the end of the day, it's all conjecture. Nobody knows. There's been no real solid news that's come out of in Roosters land. Sandon Smith, could be easy cover for Sam Walker if they wanted to give him a rest. But I kind of imagine maybe that Luke Keary would get a rest before Sam Walker would. So if you've already got DCE, Ange, absolutely hop on Walker. And if you've already got Walker, you can hop on DCE. I think that's a very easy option. And I think they're my very two clear-cut, obvious options to go with. It's just, who do you pick? Who do you pick between Walker and DCE? And honestly, I'm sure you can tell by looking at the stats and going back and forth with me and looking over what we've just gone through that it isn't exactly a clear-cut option, because you have to play either the short-term play coming into some tougher matchups and hope that DCE can score pretty well next week against the tougher teams, or you go with Walker and hope he doesn't get a rest and just know that the Roosters matchups are a little bit easier coming in home. Also, Walker's goal kicking. Out of those 5 options, Walker is the only goal kicker. So that's also increases Walker's base. He's got his hands in everything. Yeah, and also I should cover this one as well from JSW. Is Matty Burton an option? Look, yeah, he'll probably get you 60 to 75, maybe 80. I just don't see him being that kind of big ceiling guy. I don't see him being that 120, 130 kind of guy that'll win you a matchup. That's kind of what I'm looking for at the moment. And to say this with clarity, I do have Matt Burton in my team right now. So I don't want to make people think that I'm not keen on Matt Burton. I love him. I think he's a great option. I ended up buying him, I think, about 8 weeks ago. So definitely not a bad option, but would I get Walker or would I get DCE over both of them? Yeah, probably. Over Burton, sorry, I should say. Yes, I would. So, guys, I'm hoping that the rambling and the back and forth has gotten you somewhere in terms of where you want to take your DCE versus your Walker and your halfback replacement for Nathan Cleary. It's not exactly a very easy decision to make, but and thank you to Adam. Appreciate that, mate. Tough gig on my own, but I don't mind a chat. So it's all good. And thanks to everybody in the chat for keeping me going and getting involved with all of the chat. We have got a few questions coming through at the end, which is fantastic. So we'll definitely cover them. And but guys, let's quickly tackle the head-to-head trends at the moment as well, because there's some pretty relevant ones there. A lot of them centered around the halfback replacements as well. And there will be some sit-start questions, I'm assuming. So get those in the comments as well, guys. We'll spend about 15 minutes at the end of the pod just going through them. So for those of you in the hunt, I'm assuming you're probably in the top 5%. So we'll look at the statistics on the top 5%. Daly Cherry Evans comes in first at 14.1% abort, I should say. That comes him up to 20%. Sam Walker, 8.5% purchased. So only 6% behind DCE, but DCE is the clear winner at the moment across the grounds. Sam Walker, 39% owned now in the top 1% of teams. Jerome Luai, third most purchased, 6.3% of teams buying him. Dominic Young, 6.1%. Yeah, I understand that. Val Holmes, for some reason, is 4% purchased. Hang on, this can't be right. Yeah, it is. 64 people have bought Valentine Holmes this week in the top 1% of teams. And if this doesn't make you feel good about the chance of making up rank at the back end of the season, I do not know what does. Val Holmes being purchased on a buy is the most bizarre thing that I've ever seen. I'm assuming it's people probably just jumping on the guy who scored the most points last week. And I really hope it is, because unless I've missed something, Valentine Holmes won't play and he will score you 0 this week. So reverse that trade very quickly. Zach Lomax is also the 6th most purchased at 3.8% of people buying him. Look, I can't argue against that. I just don't know whether the Sharks is the matchup you want to buy Zach Lomax at 684K. I'd much, I don't know. I'd probably rather, if you don't have Carraz, I'd rather Carraz. I assume people are trading Val Holmes for Lomax maybe. But not. I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of playing the outside backs against the Sharks as well, because they've been pretty solid this year defensively. Jacob Carraz, definitely. James Tedesco, yeah, if you don't have him, absolutely. Adam Fanua-Blake, Damien Cook. I mean, would I buy Damien Cook now? Probably not. But, I mean, look, I can't really argue against his scores. I just think that you're wasting a trade at hooker at the moment. I mean, how many trades do you have for one? That's probably the one thing I'd look at is, I wouldn't be burning a trade at hooker right now at this end of the season. That's personally my opinion. But then again, I've had Harry Grant all year, so what would I know? So that is the top 10 most purchased players. Val Holmes at 5. That's fucking bizarre. Anyway, let's move on to the most sold players. And Nathan Cleary is first. 31.6% of people are getting off him, and there's still another 67% to do that. So they're obviously waiting to listen to a few podcasts and work out who they're going to go with and probably make that decision Thursday night at about 7:45 p.m. Jermaine Sarko is the second most against Melbourne. Yep, I understand why you'd sell Jermaine Sarko now. Unfortunately, hasn't really cracked on the way you'd want him to. Kalen Ponga. People are selling Kalen Ponga to go to Tedesco or to Turbo. I'm assuming it's going to be to buy Turbo, which I would not be doing. Now, Kalen Ponga playing against Souths this week could absolutely tear them to shreds. I think if you made your bet, it just depends on how many trades you've got again, but I think you've made your bed when you picked your fullbacks like 3 weeks ago. I think if you picked up Kalen Ponga with the final 5 rounds to go, you knew what you were getting into. You knew that it didn't make sense to just go back and forth between fullbacks. So for people getting off Ponga, that's quite bizarre. I know that people want to get on Turbo's matchup this week, and I completely understand it if you've got 6 trades left and you can max trade. But for those of you getting off Ponga, I don't know whether I would. I think I'd just sit and enjoy the last fortnight of Ponga as well. But then again, for those of you that are on head-to-heads and need to win this week and you want to match an opponent, then I understand that point. Connor Watson out with a HIA this week, so he is the 4th most sold player. That completely makes sense. And Kale Iro, 5th most sold as well. These are people that just don't even check the team sheets. So, shout out to Kale Iro, owners out there that are selling him, 1.9% of people. Isaac Tungo, people are selling him. Brian To'o, people are selling him as well, which is weird. I definitely wouldn't be selling To'o, that's for sure. And Isaac Tungo comes up against Canberra, who concede their most tries to right centres this year. So, if anything, Isaac Tungo will be a play this week if you can make that happen. And then you've got Scotty Drinkwater, Max Plath. People are selling Max Plath. I mean, maybe you're doing a bit of shuffling to try and get a couple of halves in, like a DCE and Walker this week, maybe. I don't know. I don't know whether I'd sell Plath. He's been pretty solid. So some weird, I'd call them weird. Maybe they're not. But some left field trades, we'll call them that. But for the most part, I agree with the majority of them. But the Val Holmes one still makes me laugh. That's a cracker. All right, guys, keep the questions coming in. I'll answer them at the end. Let's have a chat about captaincy.
Are you ready, kids?
Aye, aye, Captain!
Now, the question becomes, is it VC or is it straight C Turbo Thursday night? Let me know in the chat what you think, because I am not a fan of Thursday night straight captains. I think I've done it once with success. The rest of the time, every single time I've done it, I don't know what it is about Thursday night games, but they just suck. They've just, SuperCoach-wise, they just stink. So whilst I understand why you would straight C Turbo, I think if you have Turbo, you have to have something on him. I think it has to be a VC if it's not a C. If there is one player in the competition that I feel like has the most solid opportunity to score some major points this week, it's Turbo. And the one time I've ever had success on a Thursday night with a straight captain was Nico Hines. I think it was the night that in the pissing down rain at Shark Park where he scored 147 or something, and he came off for an early shower as well and didn't play the last 15 minutes. And I think that's probably the one time that I've ever got it right on a Thursday when Nico Hines tore him up. But every other time it's fuck me. So do I feel good about straight seeing Turbo? I mean, it's the matchup to do it if you've got the balls. And I think I'd be paying very, very close attention to my head-to-head semi-final opponent too to see what they're doing. But I think the smart move would be to look at your VC, depending on if you have any AE nightmares or not. Have a look at your a VC with Turbo, just in case something happens, injury, HIA, the worst case happens. I don't love straight seeing on a Thursday night. I really don't. You've got to have big nuts. So I don't know whether I do. I don't know whether I've got it in me, but I'll keep everybody updated. All the Insight Unlimited members will know what I'm doing on Thursday afternoon, so stay tuned for that. Jacob Carraz against the Warriors. Don't mind that either. The Warriors concede a fair amount of points to wingers this year, centre wingers. I'll try and get the stats up on the screen for you so that you know what I'm referencing here. And, the Warriors have definitely not been a good defensive team as well. We'll definitely mention that. So that's by rank. I've got this around the wrong way. Anyway, disregard that. But Carraz against the Warriors, look, he's been fantastic. And you look at the scores that he's been putting up, Jacob Carraz has been absolutely elite. I'll read out his last few scores because he's a guy that has really hurt you if you haven't owned him. He's gone 80, 120, 54, 62, and 121 in the last 5 weeks. And then keep in mind, he's also gone 115, 101, 100, 134, 100, 120, 121. So he's gone 700s this year in 24 rounds. That is insane. Like I think maybe Tedesco might be leading the way. I think Dylan Edwards and Tedesco were tied at the top there in most hundreds this year, but I'm sure Jacob Carraz and Teddy are tied now up the top. So yeah, he's been elite. And I think against the Warriors, yes, it is in Auckland. It'll be a little farewell for SJ, but that doesn't fix the defensive issues they've had this year. So I kind of like that matchup. If you are not a Turbo owner and you want to look elsewhere, I'd probably look at Jacob Carraz there. Now, looking at how many tries they concede 11 tries to right wingers. So it's not as great as I initially thought. So maybe disregard that. But yeah, Carraz still a very safe option, I must say. Captaincy-wise, Dylan Edwards against the Raiders. We know that Dylan Edwards has a bump in scoring when Nathan Cleary's out. 1, because he gets the goal kicking, but 2, because he gets to play that little first receiver role. Now, I know Jerome Luai is obviously at the halfback and Schneider at 5'8", but they do use Dylan Walker as a bit of a kind of right side first receiver a lot of the time. So he does get his hands on the ball a lot more. So, with the goal kicking, with the Raiders not being, on top of their game and playing their best footy, I don't mind Dylan Edwards as a nice little captaincy option this week as well. The other 3 guys that I have, 2 of them are very obvious, or 3 of them are probably very obvious, to be fair. Jerome Hughes versus the Dolphins. That edge defense is atrocious. Excuse me. The Dolphins are very leaky on the edges, so I'd look at Jerome Hughes as a captaincy option. I think he's due for a big game as well before a rest. I have a feeling that if he's going to rest, and he knows he's going to rest next week, I think he'll be putting in a pretty big performance there against the Dolphins, who concede a lot of points to halfbacks and 5'8" this year. And then the 2 obvious captaincy options are Kalen Ponga or James Tedesco. Just, I guess the one saving grace for me is it's either Turbo or Teddy. I think if you're not doing anything with Turbo and you can't VC one in to see the other, which is the big issue this week, you have to pick one. So I think the play for me is going to be VC Turbo into a captaincy on Jerome Hughes. I think that's probably the way that I'm leaning at the moment. In saying that, Dom Young, also a fantastic option. We've seen what he can do in recent weeks. I'm just a little bit worried about that hammy. But James Tedesco, he's versing the Titans, who concede the most tries to fullbacks this year. So I can tell you right now that if you go the early captaincy on Teddy or Turbo, if you go the early captaincy on anybody else and you've got to watch James Tedesco versus the Titans at Seabus Super Stadium, which is a very fast track, it's going to be a very hard watch from behind your couch through the slits of your fingers, I think. So, I'll be very nervous about that one. And Ange's on that narrative as well with Sam Walker at 2 p.m. Dry Seabus pitch, absolutely, with the goal kicking. Sam Walker, another fantastic option if you plan on buying him or already have him this week. And Munster versus the Dolphins. Look, IJ, if you've got the world's biggest SuperCoach nuts on you, that could be the play, because like we mentioned earlier, stats wise, Dolphins concede the most points to 5'8". So that would be, very interesting. Captain Harry, to answer your question here, mate, will you be able to see if your opponent captains Turbo before the game or only after the game starts? Only after the game starts, unfortunately. So because it is the first game of the round, as soon as the game starts, you'll see what changes are made there and what trades the person's made and what VC will see. So you won't be able to guess beforehand, unfortunately, but maybe the play would be to anti-pod him. Probably a dangerous thing to do. But if you got balls on you, maybe that's the play. All right, guys. I've nearly gone an hour. It's pretty decent for solo pod. Anyway, let's answer some questions to wrap things up, shall we?
It's question time. Let's answer your questions for the week ahead.
All right, first one to kick things off. IJ, one trade left holding for next week as I have Appy, Galvin and Munster, so I need to see if Munster is rested or not and decide who to trade. Hopefully win this week and into my cash comp final. Yeah, that wasn't a question. I starred the wrong one. So this is what happens when I don't get time to star the questions properly. But having one trade left and waiting for this week is a smart move. I think that if you've got that trade there, forcing a trade this week just for the sake of it's not a smart move because we know that next week's going to be fucking carnage. I can promise you now, and I don't think I can reiterate this enough. Next week with the Hughes, Munster, Pappenhausen, Katoa potentially, all maybe being rested for the Storm and not travelling to North Queensland. Then you've got the Tigers on the bye. So if you've got Galvin, if you've got Appy, if you've got Samuel Afainu, there's 7 players you've already lost potentially if you've got those guys. Then the Roosters in round 26 are rumoured to be resting some players. Maybe your Gus Crichtons are out. Maybe Teddy gets a rest because he's been through a massive workload recently. There goes 9 players straight off the bat. And then you've already got only 16 players available for your head-to-head grand final week. You need the trade. We're not even talking about potential restings at other clubs just yet. That's just Roosters, Storm, and Tigers. So yeah, there could be absolute chaos the next 2 weeks after this week. So if you can hold your trades, do your best. I know it's tough with the trigger finger, but do your best to hold on to them if you can. Ange, Azarko or DWZ this week? Fuck, you're not getting me much to work with here. All right, let's have a look at the draw very quickly. Azarko or DWZ. So Finns are playing against Melbourne. All right. And the Warriors are obviously playing against the Sharks, isn't it? No. I'm going to get this question off the screen because I can't see the whole draw properly. They're playing against the Bulldogs. Okay. Yeah, look. Oh, shit, that's tough. I would probably just take Asako purely because he has goal kicking. Dolphins, they do concede points, but they also, I guess, the big point here is Dolphins score as much as they concede. Yeah, they concede 30 points a game, but they're probably going to score maybe 18 to 24 points. So I think Azako's floor is safe enough. And then if he finds a try, I mean, the Storm's right edge hasn't exactly been a lockdown fortress this year. So I would like to think that Azarko might be able to find some form of attacking stat against the Storm. It's not great, but with the goal kicking on top of that, I think I definitely have the safety of Azarko and the goal kicking rather than playing against or having DWZ relying on scoring a couple of tries in the corner and scoring your 70. There's just a bit too much risk there for me. So it's probably where I'd lean with that one. The next one from Reese Gonzalez. Who would you be selling Tungo or McLean for, Karaz? Also, thoughts on Reid Marnie this week. New Zealand concede the most points to hookers. Good pickup. Would I sell Tungo or McLean? Ooh. Tungo's got a nice matchup this week, but I feel like maybe the bigger upside is Tungo. So I'd probably sell McLean. As strange as that sounds and as good as McLean's been, I think we saw at the start of the year when Tungo gets a good matchup, there's every chance he can score you 130. He can be a matchup winner for you if you play Isaac Tungo for the run home in your semi or your final. That's the way I see Isaac Tungo. He's the guy you kept in your team the whole time because you knew that he's got a big score in him. And I think I would go McLean to Karaz, and then Tungo's got a nice matchup this week too that you could play him on. What are my thoughts on Marnie? Reid Marnie is the he who shall not be named for me. I'm not even joking anymore. Last year, I bought Reid Marnie after round 2 after he scored fucking 80 and 70 or whatever it was, and he proceeded to average me probably like 44 for the rest of the year that I had him. And then this year, what I've done is I've gone, I don't want to buy Reid Marnie, but he was doing good in fantasy, scoring 50s, 55, 54, 49. And then as soon as I've bought him, hang on, let me read. I'm going to rant for a second. Let me read his NRL fantasy scores. Now, keep in mind for those of you SuperCoach heads that fantasy is obviously a little bit different. It's scored differently, so it's more base stat friendly. Reid Marnie was doing incredibly well for a while there. And then so he's scoring 59, 53, 55, 42, 78, 59. Then Nathan bought him. Buy. So I bought him after the buy, right? He's probably averaging at this point, 54.6 he's averaging at this point. Then he proceeds to score me a 43, 35, 39, 28, and 29.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
Or maybe just shit whenever I buy him. Seriously, I've never been so frustrated at a player before than Reid Marnie. And shout out to him. I'm sure he's watching. Big fan. I don't think I'd be buying Reid Marnie. No, not with the scoring and the way that he's been scoring lately. He's dropped off a cliff. I don't feel like there's much confidence there that he's going to be able to pick that back up in the coming weeks. And also, I'm fucking off him. So, shout out to Reed Marnie. Reese, last 2 reserves out of Dylan Brown, Britton Nikora, Jai Gray, Azarko, or Iro. All right, I've got to pick 2 of these. Okay. Kale Iro's been awesome. Pretty solid. Dylan Brown, let's have a look at these matchups very quickly. So we've got Dylan Brown, the Eels, who are playing the Broncos. Not a bad matchup this week. I don't mind that. So I'd probably play Brown against the Broncos. They've been pretty ordinary. Britton Nikora, the Sharks have... Sorry, guys, I don't have all of this time to do this research. Sharks have the Dragons in the final game of the week. Britton Nicker has been pretty solid. South's playing against the Newcastle Knights. I don't really love Gray's matchup against the Knights this week. So I'd probably sit Gray. Asako against the Storm. I don't love it, but like I just mentioned, like the base is there for him. I'd probably play Iro and Nikora and hope they just put a score on the draw. It is at Wynn Stadium though. Okay, here's my answer. Dylan Brown is my number 1 pick because he's playing the Broncos. And the second player that I would play is Britton Nikora is going to be running at Jaden Sewer's edge. Is that right? No, who's on the other edge for the Dragons? Because Sewer is on the right edge. This is really good audio from me. Apologies. And then on the left edge, while this loads, is Luciano Leilua, who probably not known to be the most amazing defender. So, that's probably how I go, Brown and Nikora, and then sit Asako, Iro, and Gray. I know it sucks to sit Iro, but I've told everybody to sit Iro all year, and he's just torched me. So I can't break the curse now. I have to say keep sitting Iro, and then you guys play him, and you benefit. That's how it works. Now, next question. Shout out to Adam. Appreciate the donation, mate. It's really kind of you. Reese, Cleary for Luai or a gun to RF? I mean, Gus Crichton could get rested soon. Katoa's carrying an injury. Fafita's been flat. I think I'm going for a halfback and just all Luai maybe, or can you get DCE or can you get Walker instead? It's probably how I'd prefer it. I don't know. 2RF's been really kind of lackluster, hasn't it? The last 4-6 weeks. I'd probably look at with the rest for Gus Crichton potentially coming up. I'd probably look elsewhere and go at halfback and find the upside, mate. Aaron Miller, last reserve, Galvin or McLean. I'm going to back Lockie Galvin in every single time, mate. I think Galvin has shown this year, even in really tough matchups, that he is a playable 5'8". He could be your 5'8" 1. I think Lockie Galvin is the only player in my team that I've owned all season. And Harry Grant, 2. And Galvin's been outstanding. We saw what he did last week. In a Tigers team that's getting beaten regularly, he continues to put up good scores. So there is absolutely no question there. I'll be backing in Galvin. Manly haven't exactly been a defensive fortress either. They've definitely been quite leaky at times. So it is at Leichhardt Oval. I think we'll see Galvin with the ball in his hands plenty. And I'd be backing him in against Manly. Adam S. SC upgrades to allow armbands on a reserve would be gold. Too many times choosing which fullback. If you go and play Sports Deck Dream Team, so that is basically exactly the same people that make SuperCoach, make the UI for SuperCoach, the app, have made this Dream Team Sports Deck app. So basically it's not just NRL and AFL and all that. You can actually pick like a SuperCoach team for NBA, like for NFL, for those of you that like fantasy football. And it's still SuperCoach based. So you get a certain amount of trades each week and you get captains and vice captains and boosts and all that kind of stuff. So it's actually quite fun. I play nearly every sport it is possible because I'm a bit of a SuperCoach degenerate. But that's go and play. My point was go and play Dream Team because you have 5 winger fullbacks in Dream Team, 3 on the field and then 2 reserves. So you can VC Turbo into C Teddy, which is absolutely what I'll be doing in that format this week. All right. I can talk underwater. I imagine anybody hopping onto this stream, right? And they think that I'm talking with the group, but I'm just not letting anyone talk. This is what happens when it's solos. It's not a good listen if I'm taking 10-second breaks in between my chat as much as I would really like to. But guys, I think we've gotten to the end. I think we've made it to the end. Thanks for all of your questions. I really appreciate them. And I cannot wait to have a glass of water or something once this is finished. I'll probably be back for the Q&A, for the Insight Unlimited members Q&A. I'll be back for that. We'll do that tomorrow. We'll answer all the questions leading into head-to-head semis. Tough decisions ahead. Who are you picking at halfback? Hopefully we've covered them enough for you tonight, but hop in the Discord and chat with the community if they haven't. And if you haven't yet, please hit subscribe and like. We'd love that. It helps us reach more people. And for those of you that are into your SuperCoach NBL or even BBL at the end of the year, go and check out the NBL boys. Matrix is over there. And he's been doing a killer job with Hammer in their first episode of the NBL SuperCoach show. BBL's coming at the end of the year with me and Horse. And I will be back tomorrow to do the Q&A. I'll see you then.